What's up guys, Pop by Pigs for Life here, and today we're back with another episode of Conservation Carnival in Planet Zoo. So, last time we left off, we have made a couple of changes to the petting zoo to start. We made a new and improved domestic animal enclosure. We also added in this little apple orchard, as well as making some preparations for this episode, which we will get into in just a little bit. So then also, one thing we did last episode is we added in these new enclosures for the grizzly bear, which is somewhere in here. Ooh, they're both right in here. Ooh, as we're doing the animal talk, this is perfect. We also added in an enclosure for the jaguars. Ooh, looks like the jaguar's also inside, taking a little nap. And we also added an enclosure for the spectacled bears, wherever they may be. Ooh, one's taking a little bit of a swim. Alright, and so let's pause this for now, because one of the things I want to go over is that you can probably tell that I did a little bit of work off camera. So one of the things that I ended up doing is I added in a little bit of terrain around the train track, which I also edited, made it a little bit smaller because we're probably not going to need this entire map. So because that, what I did is I just made it a little bit more natural by adding in some terrain around the area that we are going to need. So while I was at it, one thing I also did is I also added a couple of the Steam Workshop blueprints that I downloaded at the end of last video into the area. So for instance, I connected up this gas station right over here. And I also downloaded a new blueprint, which is this amazing looking public pool right over here. So all the blueprints that I downloaded from the Steam Workshop will be in the description down below. I am not a very good builder, and I do not have the patience to go into the detail that you'll see other people do. So because of that, I just download some items from the Steam Workshop. So, oh yeah, I also made a couple changes to the school. I combined it into one big school. So that's gonna lead into today's video. So pretty much the premise of today's video is we're going to do quite a couple of zoo improvements. So to start, what we're gonna do is we're going to completely take down this neighborhood looking area, and we're going to split the area into a trailer park over here. I might keep the little pond over here because it looks like it would look good for a campground sort of area. So because of that, we'll make this area nice and forested, so that way we can add some of these trailers that I also downloaded at the end of last episode. And then right over here, we're going to add in some of the other town buildings. So for example, we're going to add in this supermarket, which has some really awesome detail. If we turn on the light for just a sec, like, there is so much detail in this supermarket. Like, the shelves with all the produce, like, whoever did this, like, you outdid yourself with this one. So I also downloaded a couple of items that can be used for the school. So for instance, I added in a basketball court, I added in some playground stuff, and I also added in this school bus. So then here's the plan. So like I mentioned, this area is gonna be a trailer park, but then this area is going to be sort of like a plaza. So this is where the supermarket, the bank, which is right over here, as well as the fire station and police station are all going to go. So then from here, what's going to happen is the wolves are going to get their own enclosure in the carnival, which we will do in another episode. The main wolves are going to go in the current grizzly bear enclosure, so the grizzly bears will get a new enclosure, and the main wolves will go right in here. And then the dingoes, the idea is, since they have descended from domestic dogs brought to Australia by indigenous people, what we're going to do is we're going to plop them in this enclosure, and the emus and wombats are going to go right in this enclosure. The wombats will eventually get released to the wilds, however, we're just waiting for the little baby potato to mature. And as you can see, we have released all of the quokkas into the wild. So, like I had mentioned at the end of last episode, the wallabies and quokkas will return in a future Planet Zoo series, but I don't really see them fitting too well in the petting zoo after thinking about it. So pretty much the premise of this video is going to be what I had mentioned, is just zoo improvements, so just improvements of the general area. But if we have time, what I might do is I might do a little bit of planning for the rest of the carnival. So yeah, so we have quite a lot that we need to get done in this episode. So without any further talking, let's get right into the first time lapse. Alrighty guys, so the first thing that I decided to do in today's time-lapse is I decided to replace the perimeter fence of the petting zoo with the metallic sheet that I used in the previous dingo, maned wolf, and timber wolf enclosures. And then right after that, it is onto the first habitat, which I decided would be the emu and wombat enclosure. So one thing that you'll see me do with both this enclosure, but as well as the dingo enclosure, is rather than deleting everything and starting from scratch, I decided to move some of the elements and to reuse them, so that way I wouldn't have to go through the hassle of doing it all over again. So normally, while I do like to start from a blank canvas, I also do know when it is best to reuse elements. So because that, what I decided to do is, since the foliage was already in a group that I was pretty happy with, I pretty much just selected the foliage and the enrichment and moved it all over to the new enclosure. So obviously, like I had mentioned, the wombats are not going to be staying here for long, and eventually they will all be released into the wild. But until then, I do of course have to add in all of their enrichment and their feeding troughs, so that way, you know, they can actually live a good life in captivity until they are eventually released. So then what you can see that I am doing right now is I am sort of moving everything over in the koala, wallaby, and kangaroo enclosure. So previously we had the path right up against the fence, and while we still do have a portion of it up against the fence, I decided to move it a little bit in more, so that way the dingoes would have a little bit more space. And then there was also that area that only the quokkas were able to access, so I also combined that into the kangaroo, koala, and wallaby enclosure. Honestly, I've put a little bit of thought into this, but what I might do is I might still add in a couple of viewing domes into the dingo enclosure, and what I'll probably do is I'll probably disguise the viewing dome entrance as another one of those windmills. And now it is time to add in the dingoes themselves. So like I did with the emu and wombat enclosure, I once again took a lot of the foliage groups that were in the previous dingo enclosure and I just moved them over to their new enclosure. So that includes enrichment, that includes a couple of the foliage groups. I didn't use all of them because there was just so many in the old dingo enclosure that we just could not fit them all in the new enclosure. So because of that, I did have to delete a couple. And speaking of deleting stuff, now it is time that we clear out the the previous enclosure. But first, time to do a little bit of terrain work. Decide to add in some hills and some rocks to make the enclosure look a little bit more interesting. And then pretty much after that, we are pretty much going into demolition mode from here on out, as we are pretty much deleting everything. So the timber wolves and the main wolves were already boxed in the trade center, so now we are pretty much deleting everything from the previous enclosures except for the timber wolf enclosure, because I did want to use some of the foliage in the trailer park, and I also thought that the little lake made a very good touch to the trailer park. So what I kind of like to imagine is, while people are staying in the trailer park, while they are out camping, if they want to, they can go take a dip in the pond to cool off. So at first, I envisioned this area as sort of like a traditional trailer park, where there's basically this expanse of open field, and there is just rows upon rows of camper vans. But then as I was building it, I sort of styled it more as a campsite, where it's very forested, and there's like a couple of dirt roads and trails that the campers can pull up, and they can just pull over and set up camp overnight. So in a little bit, you'll see that I really emphasized the campsite sort of bit, especially with the foliage, but also I added in a little sign from one of the Australian rock collections. And so what I also did is, there was a little gap in between some of the foliage that led to a little rock outcrop, and what I decided to do is I decided to add a smaller dirt trail that guests could maybe walk on, so that way they could see some landmarks in the middle of the woods. So after this, we are pretty much just filling in any unnecessary gaps with foliage. I especially used a lot of the bracken pieces, and I used a wide plethora of temperate trees. As you can see, I also made sure to add in some nice and grassy patches where I saw fit. And then pretty much after adding in all the foliage, it was now time to work on the plaza section. So I first had to start by demolishing pretty much all of the old setup that I had. I did keep the concrete road as sort of like an outline, and what I did is I built upon it. I made this entire area just concrete, so that way we could have a nice parking lot. I took a bunch of the parking stalls from the carnival parking lot, and what I did is I modified it so that way there would be like parking lot grids, so the parking spaces would be in sort of like a grid rather than up against the edge of the parking lot. And what I did is, in between, I added in some New World lampposts, and in the end, it just looked super awesome. So right now you can see I'm sort of finicking with the path, because I did not realize that there was a staff room on top of the bank, and so because of that, I sort of had to make a second story without interfering with the path that's inside the bank. So eventually I got something I liked, but you'll see that I'm sort of just playing around with what looks good, but also what is functional. So eventually I did figure something out, though there was a little bit of a gap between the stairway going up to the staff room and the bank itself. So because of that, I just filled it in with a couple of cypress trees, and that looked pretty good. So speaking of filling in the gaps, there were a couple of gaps in between the parking lot and the main road. Those I'm likely going to fill with some of the desert foliage. Like that, we have a blend of desert foliage and temperate foliage. So now you can see I am adding in the supermarket, and I couldn't get it close to the path right off the bat, so what I had to do is I had to place it down away from the path, and then I had to move it all in 2 different sections. So you can see I'm sort of lining it up like it was before I moved it all, and eventually I got it pretty perfect, and then after that I was able to put down the grid of paths so that way guests could be able to go into the supermarket. So then pretty much the only other building that we are able to add into this little plaza is the gas station. And so pretty much after that we are able to move on to the next section, which is going to be right behind the supermarket, and that is going to be where the fire station and police station will go. So now you can see that we are working some more on the parking lot. So initially I decided to make it a little bit smaller, but eventually you'll see that I added the path back after I had flattened it out, and now you can see we are working on the parking stalls. So with the carnival parking lot, I went more for having the parking spaces along the edge of the parking lot, but for the plaza, I decided to go for the parking spots in the middle. So you can see I've got some areas of parking spots, and right in between, like I had mentioned, I added in some lamp posts, and all in all, I'm really satisfied with how the parking stalls looked in the end. So now you can see I am furnishing the bank by adding in some benches, and I saw that the benches were sort of phasing into the wall a little bit, so because that I was able to reconfigure the way the path grid was lined up with the building, and then pretty much from there it was smooth sailing. So then what I decided to do is I decided to replace the benches with the aquatic benches. At first I wanted to use the African benches, but then I decided to use the aquatic benches in the end. As you can see, I just filled in some of the gaps with some more foliage. And now I got distracted a little bit and added in another guest section that is a little bit closer to the drive-thru safari and the carnival. So yeah, I decided to move it so that way it was right across from the burger joints. And then after that, I believe what happened is, yeah, we're adding in the gas station in the plaza, and same thing, adding in a little grid where the cars can pull in, they can get gas, filled in a little gap with some azalea bushes, and now we're adding even more foliage. So after we add in the foliage, then it was time that we added in the police station and the fire station, because of course, if you have any town, you need some sort of safety service in the form of a fire station and a police station. So that's what we are adding right now. The 2 blueprints I downloaded were awesome, so shout out to all the people who built these incredible blueprints and shared them on the Steam Workshop. So one thing you saw that I did off camera is I found a way to sort of connect the police station and the fire station into one building, and so that's the same thing that I went for with the placement over here. And so now we just needed to add in a little parking lot so that way the police cars and the fire trucks could pull in, they could go out, they could, I don't know, maybe get some maintenance done. So originally I tried to use the staff path, but I decided that the regular concrete just looked better. Also, thinking about it, maybe we can add in a couple of those parking stalls a little bit later on. And so now what we are going to do is, again, we are just finishing up with a little bit of foliage, and then we are ready to move on to the school. But before we do that, we are filling in a couple of the aforementioned gaps in between the parking lot and the main road with a little bit of that desert foliage. Now, while we're doing that, I just want to quickly mention to you guys that this year we are trying to reach 175 subscribers before the end of 2025. So if you find that you are enjoying this video so far, then please make sure to leave a like, comment down below any suggestions or feedback, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It truly means a lot all of the support you are showing me on these videos. And as I always say, even by taking the time to sit down and watch this video is showing me so much support. So thank you all so much. Alright, so back to working on the school. So with the school, I definitely took a lot of inspiration from my high school. So basically how it works is, in the front is where the buses drop off kids, and then to the right-hand side, there is the car drop-offs, so where kids are dropped off by their parents, and then in that same area there is also a parking lot for the teachers. Now, to the left-hand side, what I decided to do is I decided to add in a playground and a basketball court, because I imagine that since this town is fairly small, basically there is enough children that all grades K through 12 can go to this school. So now, one thing that you'll notice that I didn't mention beforehand is, if you guys remember from last episode, I also included a blueprint for a museum. However, as you can see, I decided to delete it because the blueprint was acting very strange and was glitching out on me, so I didn't want that to sort of rub off on the rest of the save file, if you will, so because of that I decided to get rid of it. Besides, I feel like all of this was plenty to use up the excess space that we have, and I really love all that we've gotten done thus far. This is really starting to look like a proper town. So pretty much all I'm doing now is just finishing up the schoolyard by adding in some grass and a couple of big trees to provide some shade for the children. And then after that, we're pretty much just going to fill in a couple more gaps with some of the desert foliage, and then we are going to move on to the new and improved maned wolf enclosure. Also, I really quickly have to say that I really enjoyed recording this video. At first, I was sort of on the fence about the zoo, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. However, after seeing all that this zoo has become just after this episode, I am really feeling inspired to want to finish the zoo. So now you can see that I am adding in some foliage to fill the gaps, like I had mentioned, and then we are going to move on to the maned wolf enclosure. So for the maned wolf enclosure, as you can see, I am moving some of the assets from the grizzly bear enclosure, so that way I can use them in their new enclosure. And for the maned wolf, I decided to go for more of a grassland vibe, because with the Andean bears you have more of a mountainous enclosure, with the jaguars it's more tropical, and with the maned wolves I wanted something a little bit different, so that way we could sort of capture the different ecoregions of South America. So because of that, I went for more of a grassland vibe. I added in some of those big trees that pretty much one just took up the entire space. And then from there, I did add in a little bit of tropical foliage on the inside area of the enclosure. And then after that, it's pretty much just adding in a couple of goem palms, and then just adding in the enrichment, and we are pretty much done with this enclosure. Okay guys, I have to say, this area of the zoo is already looking 10 times better than it originally did. Like, the sheer amount of detail in this. Also, you can tell that I did a little bit of detailing off camera by adding in the cars, but just the sheer amount of detail in this entire area looks absolutely phenomenal. So, like, not only do you have the little plaza over here with the supermarket and with the gas station and the bank, but you've also got this little fire station right over here and police station. And then one thing I did off camera is I added in this little area. This is meant to be the town hall. So if you guys remember, Previously, I had one of these buildings over here, and I had the other one right over here. What I ended up doing is I moved that one, and I just replaced a couple of the street buildings, and so I turned this into one big town hall. So the idea is this town is a little bit similar to my town, where basically it is so small that it doesn't have a mayor. However, a town hall is still very important because that is where people can get various permits signed. It's where the financial offices are. It's where people who collect the water bills and the taxes do their job. So even though this town doesn't have a mayor, this is still very important for the finances of the town, which, like I mentioned, are heavily based around tourism. So speaking of tourism, right over here, this trailer park looks absolutely phenomenal. So like I had mentioned in the time lapse, this is quite different than how I had originally planned this. However, this is looking amazing regardless. So if we go into explore mode really quickly, right over here you've got obviously the dirt road where the trailers can park. You've got this nice little pond over here, and then over here you've got this little hiking trail which leads to this little rocky outcrop. So yeah, so this looks really awesome, I must say. So anyways, so I was browsing the Steam Workshop, and I thought of a couple of other buildings that we could add. So to start, I found this hospital blueprint, and I modified it slightly so that way the top would have one-way glass, so that way people wouldn't know that there's nothing up here. So then I might honestly make a couple of modifications to it, like adding in some interior design. So then some other blueprints that I found include this random brick building, which I plan on using as a post office, because post offices are very crucial for a town. Not only is where you get mail delivered, but it is also where you can get passports and stuff. And then one other thing that I downloaded, which is by far the largest blueprint, is this massive hotel. So obviously some of the stuff is in German, so I will change that. But this is a giant hotel that I'm probably going to put right here. Originally, I was thinking of adding in a mini sort of neighborhood like I had, but I feel like since this town is heavily based around tourism, I felt like it was a worthy addition. So we're probably not going to do that in this episode. That will probably be something for next episode, because really quickly, I want to get in one new animal this episode. So I've been thinking, and as you can see, I did a little bit more work off camera by moving the habitat gates for the Andean bear and maned wolf right in here. And so right here, what's going to happen is this is going to be the Fossa habitat. So that is the new animal that we're going to add in this episode. And also, one thing I decided that I kind of want to do is I want to quickly go ahead and add a couple of viewing domes, not only in the dingo enclosure, which I had mentioned, but I also kind of want to do a couple in the maned wolf enclosure. And I have a really excellent idea on how we're going to achieve this. So let's go and add the viewing dome entrance. Let's quickly move the pronghorn pinata enrichment right over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these. We're going to move it right over here. Alright, so that is pretty much as good as we're going to get it. So now what we're going to do is we are going to place some domes. And we're going to place some in several areas throughout the enclosure where the main wolves may walk about. Can we place it over here? Okay, I might need to move this. There. Please tell me. Haha, yes! Alright, so that should about do it. And let's do the same for the dingo habitat. By the way, let's just take a look at the habitats. So right here we've got the emu habitat, which looks super awesome. I didn't really know like what else to put here, so I just again reused a load of the same elements from earlier. We've got the wombat enrichment all connected up, so that way we could just delete it as soon as they get released. And here's the dingo enclosure. So felt a little bit empty, so because of that I decided to add in some hills, just like the previous enclosure. And yeah, we need to add in some viewing domes. So let's add one here. Let's add one right here. Let's add one here. And let's add one here. And of course, we need to add the viewing dome, which will be disguised as a windmill. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now, what we are going to do is we are going to move on to the Fossa enclosure. Alright, here are the Fossas. Yeah, as to be expected. Way too much sand. Also, let's change this to something that the guests can actually see through. So I'm thinking, let's do glass over here, and let's do steel mesh. Nah, let's do more glass. One-way glass. Just checking, they can't get out. They can't get out. Excellent. Let's start with the terrain. So they need a load of short grass. Okay, that'll do it for now. Now, we need to add in some plants. And I really want to add plants that they can climb on, so probably won't do any kapok trees, but I probably will use a lot of these, I think, yeah. Alrighty guys, so as we are adding in the foliage to the Fossa enclosure, I'm just going to share a couple of quick facts with you guys. So the Fossa is the largest carnivore found on the island of Madagascar, and it is the top predator of the ecosystem, being able to prey on the largest lemurs. Speaking of which, while the Fossa preys on a wide range of different animals, lemurs make up the majority of its diet. These animals have many special adaptations that allow them to easily catch lemurs, such as an elongated tail to help them balance as they chase the lemurs through the treetops, retractable claws, much like those of a cat, as well as very flexible ankle joints that allow them to climb down from a tree head first. While they have many traits that are similar to those of cats, they are actually more closely related to mongooses. In fact, pretty much all of the mammalian carnivores on Madagascar have their own separate branch that splits off from other mainland mongooses. Alrighty, so overall for plant coverage, this looks really awesome. Oh, why is this like that? There we go. Yeah, but no, this looks incredible with the plants. Like, I love this. So, now what I think we're gonna do is, obviously, we need to add in the path. It's gonna go right like that. Perfect. for now, that's fine. They can go all throughout here. But man, I'm really proud of this enclosure. Like, this looks so awesome. So now really all we have to do is we, of course, have to add in all of the enrichment. There we go. This looks absolutely fantastic. Oh, but look at them. They're using the climbing frames. Oh my gosh, these are such amazing looking animals. Wow, this is incredible. The apex predator of Madagascar. This is fantastic. And the habitat itself looks super good in and of itself. Like, look at this. Like, all the attention to detail with the foliage. Like, this really looks like I'm in the middle of the jungle. This is insane. Alright guys, so I think that is where I'm gonna leave it for this episode. We got so much done in this episode, and I am really impressed with how this zoo is looking so far. So we started by adding in quite a lot of buildings throughout the town. So we added in this amazing plaza with a supermarket and a bank. We added in this police station, fire station, and really quickly, before we do anything, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. Perfect! Last little touch, looking excellent. So we added in the fire station, police station, we added in a supermarket, a bank, we added several gas stations, we added in the town hall. So then we also went ahead and built this amazing campsite for the tourists that are visiting Conservation Carnival. We also added in this fantastic looking school ground for the children of the town. We added in the swimming pool. We made several more improvements to the petting zoo with the new and improved emu and wombat enclosure, as well as the new dingo enclosure. And we also made several new improvements to the carnival with the new maned wolf enclosure and with the new Fossa enclosure, which is looking absolutely stunning. So now, the plan for next video is we are going to do a couple more improvements to the town. So what I'm probably going to do is off camera, I am going to do a little bit of work on the hospital. So I'm thinking the hospital is going to go right over here. And what I'll probably do is I will do a little bit of interior work in the hospital to make it look a little bit more interesting. So we'll also add in like a lobby, we'll do a parking lot for the ambulances. I feel like one thing we can do really quickly is we can add in the post office. And I'm thinking we'll add the post office right there. Perfect. So this is the post office, and it looks absolutely stunning. So what we're gonna do is from here, I'm probably gonna add in a little bit of a parking lot for the post office. Same thing with the hospital. So I'll do that off camera. And so next episode, what we're gonna do is we're going to add in the hotel, and that is gonna go right here. What we'll probably also do is we'll probably turn this area into a little bit of a neighborhood. So it'll be sort of like a mini neighborhood right over here. And then we will add in a wide array of houses along here. And we will do some planning for the next couple of animals in Conservation Carnival. So one thing that I want to prioritize with the carnival section is I want to rehome all the animals that originally got enclosures elsewhere. So because that, what we'll probably do is we'll probably start with the new grizzly bear and a new timber wolf enclosure. And that will probably go somewhere right over here. And on top of that, we will add in some viewing domes for the Andean bear and jaguar enclosures. So yeah, with that being said, that is going to wrap up today's video. Really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to see some more Planet Zoo and Jurassic World Evolution 2 content. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.